How are you?
We're ready when you are.
Okay. Hello everyone, it's so wonderful to be here with John and Michael in the Shadow Cabinet in Pakenham today. There's a whole lot of community groups have come to just talk about the needs in this area. It's one of the most fast growing areas in the state, but we just haven't had the infrastructure to keep up with it. So it's just been wonderful to have them here to hear what needs to be done so we can build for the future.
Thanks, Renee.
Thank you.
Yes, as Renee said, we're really delighted to have been able to hold Shadow Cabinet here at the Cardinia Cultural Centre here in the seat of Pakenham. It's an area that's experiencing so much of the population growth that Victoria itself is experiencing. And just a bit of background on that, Victoria in the last year took on around about 30% of the nation's population growth, and a lot of that is being felt in outer growth areas like Pakenham and the growth corridors right across outer metropolitan Melbourne and many of our regions. And what we heard today was from community representatives and leaders who are telling us that the area is not getting the support it needs from the Allan Labor government. We were told that there are anywhere between 3 and 7 families settling in the area every day. That's a lot of people every day, and you need a state government that is responsive to that kind of growth. And we're very determined as an opposition, determined to become the government in November 2026 to make sure that we have a vision for our entire state. That means looking at areas like Pakenham and Cardinia and Casey, right across the outer suburban corridors of Melbourne that are feeling the weight of that population growth, and actually having a plan to deliver the infrastructure that they will need, whether it's roads, public transport, hospitals, schools, all the local infrastructure that you need to support a growing community. That's why it was so important for us to be here in Pakenham, and we'll continue to do that right across our great state. I also want to take this opportunity to reflect on the report of the outgoing Ombudsman, Deborah Glass, who's been in the role for around 10 years. In the space of 2 weeks, we have 2 damning assessments of the Allan Labor government. Last week it was the Auditor General. Today it's the Ombudsman. And I guess this report may well be more significant than many of the Ombudsman's earlier reports, and indeed the Auditor General's earlier reports, because she provides a very frank assessment of the attitude of the Allan Labor government to the principles of transparency, of integrity, of scrutiny, and ultimately of accountability. And the story Deborah Glass tells in her outgoing comments is one of a government that does everything it can to stonewall, everything it can to bury the truth, everything it can to obstruct fair and legitimate inquiries into the operations of what is a rotten government, a government that has been accused in report after report by independent agency watchdogs that point to things like corruption, things like politicisation of our once great public service, misuse of public funds, and ultimately of utter waste of taxpayer dollars in the midst of a cost of living crisis. The comments of the outgoing Ombudsman tell all you need to know about the Allan Labor government and its attitude towards the truth, transparency, scrutiny, and ultimately accountability. I'll hand over to Michael.
Thanks, JP. Thanks, Renee. Well, I picked up the copy of the latest Star News and says crime top of mind. And that is absolutely what we're hearing from the people here in Pakenham today. Crime is top of mind. And why shouldn't it be? We're seeing a massive increase in aggravated burglaries, in burglaries and thefts from motor cars. And what is the Allan Labor government's response? They weaken bail laws. Today, the Allan Labor government has weakened Victoria's bail laws. They have weakened the test for repeat serious offenders to get bail. Now, can you find one Victorian who isn't a paid-up member of the Labor Party who would tell you that when we have a youth crime crisis, the best answer is to make it easier for repeat offenders to keep getting bail? Yet that is exactly what the Allan Labor government has done today. We've warned them about it. The Police Association have not called for this. There's grave concerns this is going to make it even harder to put repeat serious offenders behind bars. But Jacinta Allan and the Labor government always put ideology ahead of community safety. And that's what this is. This is an ideological decision. It's about politics. It's not about protecting Victorians. It's not about keeping Victorians safe. Well, the Liberals and Nationals say the government's got it wrong on this. This is the wrong time to be weakening bail laws. In fact, if anything, we should be making it tougher for repeat serious offenders to get bail.
Thanks, Mike. Any questions? Did you want to start off with Michael? Or...
Wow, you stepped away. I was going to start with you while you're there.
Okay,
Just on protests at the moment, Michael. Jacinda Allen said today that the New South Wales model, where police can actually, the CCP up there can actually oppose a protest on certain grounds. She says that model wouldn't work in Victoria. What do you make of that, given the situation we've seen play out over the weekend?
Yeah. Look, we see Victoria Police diverted from tracking down criminals to having to babysit protests every single week. As Shane Patton has said, Victoria's become the protest capital, not just of the country, but possibly of the world. And what was Labor's response? Well, weaken police powers, abolish move-on powers, make it harder for police to put the public interest first. Is it any wonder we attract the ratbags of Extinction Rebellion when they know that the Victoria Police don't have the powers to do much about it? This government does need to get serious about making sure that the streets belong to law-abiding Victorians, not anybody who wants to block roads anytime they feel like it. The first thing they should be doing is restoring police move-on powers. We've tried to do that many times in the Parliament. It's something that we're committed to doing, and if we are elected to government, it'll be a first order of business for a Liberal Nationals coalition.
Premier says police already do have all the appropriate powers, all the powers and resources that they actually need to move people on. Is she wrong?
No, she is wrong, because if Jacinda Allen had bothered to watch the interview with Shane Patton on, I think, a rival network, Heidi, a couple of weeks ago, you probably wouldn't have seen it, I'm sure. But Chief Commissioner Patton made it very clear. Police are lacking move-on powers. It makes their job harder. And yet the Labor government, again, puts politics before safety. They put ideology before common sense, and they won't give police the move-on powers they need and are asking for.
Would you back this permit system in a couple of years' time if you're in the position?
Look, I'd like to have a little bit more of a look about how it works in New South Wales, but as I say, a first order of business for a Pesutto Liberal National government will be restoring move-on powers to police. Let's see how that works, and then see if we need to go further.
Just for Mr. Pesutto. So we're about halfway through the term, or thereabouts. We've seen research out from Redbridge this morning putting the coalition in the best position in 3 years since Michael was leader. What do you put that down to?
Look, I'm not going to comment on the polls today. We're here in Pakenham because Victorians will have in 2026 a very important decision to make. Under Jacinda Allen and her Labor government, you're going to see all of our state's eggs put in one basket, the suburban rail loop. And one of the messages I was able to impart to our guests here in Pakenham today was that by putting all of our eggs in one basket, Jacinda Allen will ensure that there's no money for anyone else elsewhere across our state. And that's not right, and it's not fair. We need a whole of state vision. And if you commit everything to the suburban rail loop, which is going to cost well over $200 billion, there'll be no money for Pakenham. There'll be no money for Melton, or Hume City Council, or Wyndham, or the regions and rural areas of our great state. That is the important choice people will have to make. It's one of the most important choices the Victorian people will be making in 2026, and that's what we're committed to prosecuting, that case about fairness and a vision for our whole state.
It must feel like you're making some headway, though, and that must feel good.
I just don't think there's any point in talking about polls. When we've got important work to do as an opposition, we're just going to work really hard every day in a determined way to make sure the voices, whether it's the people of Pakenham, but people everywhere across our state, are heard, because increasingly we're hearing a very difficult story from people that they're just not being listened to, and the government under Jacinda Allen is just ignoring them.
I asked a pretty similar question of the Premier this morning, so I'll ask it to you. Do you expect to be facing Jacinda Allen as opposition leader, the Premier, at the 2026 state election?
I'm not so much focused on who the Labor leader will be. I'm focused on making sure the Victorian people get a better government than the one they've got, and that's what we will be when the election comes in 2026.
So you'll be the opposition leader come 2026?
Yes.
Okay. And the Ombudsman, in her report today, I'm not sure if you've read the full thing, but she sort of goes into how she was appointed, and she spoke to the then Department of Premier and Cabinet Secretary about funding, And then when Chris Eccles took over, essentially, or Daniel Andrews changed the arrangements there, she got nothing out of the new GPC secretary at the time in terms of funding. Will you, if elected, restore or at least increase funding to integrity agencies such as the Ombudsman?
Yes. Under a Liberal Nationals government, we've already said that we will have a policy that secures ongoing funding with more funding for our integrity agencies, and we will give them more power to do the work they need to do. Because what we've seen under Labor is a government that has been doing everything it can to thwart the Ombudsman and the Auditor General and the other agencies of government, including the Parliamentary Budget Office, which is supposed to be an independent agency costing government and opposition policies. And it's turned its back on that as well. We need a strong integrity regime. You'll only get that under a Liberal government.
And part of that, she also talks about cabinet in confidence documents and saying that the government often, or under the Labor administration up to 2014, have used that as a shield. Will you reform the system, should you be elected, so that cabinet in confidence documents are either able to be released to the public more sooner, or at least used by an ombudsman in the scope of an investigation?
Yeah, we believe that it's important only to rely on exemptions like cabinet in confidence when it's genuine, when there's a genuine need to protect commercial in confidence. That's long been the case. What's happened under the Allen Labor government is they've abused that principle, and they've invoked that principle of cabinet in confidence to hide wrongdoing or to be untruthful to the Victorian people. Let me give you an example of what I mean by that, because it's a serious accusation to make. On the 20th of April last year, the Allen Labor government increased the budget for the Commonwealth Games from $2.6 billion to $3.6 billion. But what it did is it hid that fact in general contingency so no one would ever find out. And it's not going to release the cabinet material around that wrongful decision, in my view, because they're going to hide behind cabinet in confidence. That's not a proper use of cabinet in confidence, in my view. It shouldn't be used to cover up wrongdoing. It shouldn't be used to cover up gross waste, which we've seen under the Allen Labor government. So yes, these principles have long stood in the range of options for governments, but they've previously to now generally been used only when it's legitimate to do so.
So will you clearly define what's genuine?
Yeah, I mean, we'll be very upfront with the Victorian people and very upfront with the Parliament about when we invoke cabinet in confidence and why it's important. And we will have no problems in doing that. What the Allen Labor government has faced is the struggle when you're trying to justify something when there's no defence for the conduct concerned.
Premier, the Ombudsman also writes about how Daniel Andrews' first act was to move on a public servant who gave frank and fearless advice around East-West Link, and said that was the start of I think she said legacy of fear. And do you have any optimism that the changing of the guard in the Premier's job has changed that legacy?
I don't have any confidence because, with no disrespect, Jacinta Allen was a co-pilot along with Daniel Andrews. All of these decisions were made while she stood right next to Daniel Andrews. She was a part of the Commonwealth Games debacle. She oversaw massive blowouts on major projects. She sat around the same table that wrote out the plan for suburban road leap on the back of a coaster, and we're now paying a huge price for it. Premier Allen has been at the scene of every blowout, of every attempt to cover up transparency and stop proper scrutiny of the government's actions.
You talk a lot about waste, talk about getting rid of waste, talk a lot about blowouts and whatnot. Do you support the level of government spending on the Grand Prix?
Look, we don't get access to all of the costings around it. Can I make it clear? We strongly support the Australian Grand Prix. It's a marquee event for our fantastic state and indeed for our country. So we do support it. We'll always be interested at looking at ways to make sure the burden on the taxpayer is minimised, but it is an event we need to keep. It is a great way to showcase our great city and our great state. So again, transparency wherever we can allow it is better for the whole state.
So you'd release all Grand Prix contracts? Because historically, those contracts are subject to cabinet in confidence.
Yeah, look, we understand the sensitivity around that, and there may well be aspects of commercial in confidence that need to be protected, but that doesn't mean you can't have an open and honest discussion with the Victorian people about the value proposition of hosting the Grand Prix. It is a global event. We have hundreds of millions of people tuned into Melbourne, and that's a great thing. We need to keep it. But can we do better in terms of transparency? I would call on the government to do that. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, John.